Mike Turner had been delivering packages for nearly 10 years. He had seen all kinds of houses, met all kinds of people. Some were friendly, offering him a cold drink on hot days. Others barely said a word, grabbing their package and slamming the door shut. But nothing had ever made his heart race like what happened that afternoon. It was a quiet neighborhood, the kind with neatly trimmed lawns and colorful flowers in front of every house. The sun was setting, casting a warm glow over everything. Mike pulled up in his truck and checked the address on the package. Benson Street, house number 412, he muttered. He grabbed the small brown box and walked up the short driveway. As he reached the front door, he noticed something odd. The house looked normal from the outside, but there was no sound, no TV, no music, not even the barking of a dog. Most homes had some kind of noise, especially at this hour when families were finishing dinner or kids were playing outside. But here, it was completely silent. Mike rang the doorbell and waited. He expected a grown-up to open the door, maybe a busy parent or a teenager on their phone. Instead, after a few seconds, he heard the soft sound of tiny feet shuffling inside. The door handle turned slowly, and then, to his surprise, the door opened just a crack. A little girl stood there. She looked no older than 5 years old. Her brown hair was tangled, and she wore a pink nightgown that looked a little dirty. She had big round eyes that stared up at him, curious but cautious. "Hi there," Mike said gently, bending down slightly so he wouldn't seem scary. "Is your mommy or daddy home?" The girl didn't answer right away. She just looked at him, then glanced over her shoulder, as if checking something behind her. Finally, she shook her head. Mike's stomach tightened. He had kids of his own, a 7-year-old son and a 4-year-old daughter. He knew kids weren't supposed to answer the door alone. Something wasn't right. "Are you home all by yourself?" he asked. She hesitated again, then shook her head. "Mommy's here," she whispered. Mike felt a small wave of relief, until the girl opened the door a little wider. From where he stood, Mike could now see part of the living room. It was a mess. Clothes were scattered on the floor, along with empty food wrappers and juice boxes. The curtains were drawn, making the room look dark even though the sun was still out. A strange smell lingered in the air, not exactly bad, but stale, like the house hadn't been cleaned in a long time. Mike felt a shiver run down his spine. He glanced back at the little girl, who was now biting her lip, looking unsure. Something told him he shouldn't just hand over the package and leave. "Is your mommy okay?" he asked carefully. The girl hesitated again. Then, in the softest voice, she said something that made Mike's breath catch. "Mommy won't wake up." Mike's heart pounded. He knew in that instant he couldn't just walk away. Mike's hands tightened around the package he was holding. He stared at the little girl, his heart racing. "Mommy won't wake up," he repeated, trying to stay calm. The girl nodded slowly. Her small fingers clutched the edge of the door as if she wasn't sure if she should open it wider or close it. Mike could see the worry in her big round eyes. He knew he had to do something. He couldn't just leave. But he also didn't want to scare the child. "Okay," he said gently. "Can you take me to your mommy?" The girl hesitated. She looked over her shoulder again, then back at Mike. After a moment, she nodded. She stepped back and pulled the door open all the way. Mike took a deep breath and stepped inside. As soon as he entered, the smell hit him stronger. Stale air mixed with something else, something he couldn't quite place. The house was quiet, too quiet. The living room looked like it hadn't been cleaned in weeks. There were crumpled tissues on the floor, empty plates on the coffee table, and a blanket half-draped over the couch. A stuffed teddy bear lay face down near the doorway. Mike forced himself to stay calm. Maybe the girl's mom was just sick. Maybe she had a bad flu and had been sleeping all day. That would explain the mess. But deep down, he felt uneasy. "Where is your mommy?" he asked. The girl pointed down the hallway. Mike followed her, his footsteps light on the wooden floor. The hallway was dim, the only light coming from a small nightlight plugged into the wall. The girl led him to a bedroom at the end of the hall. The door was half open. Mike hesitated for just a second before stepping inside. His eyes went straight to the bed. A woman lay there, completely still. Her dark hair was spread across the pillow, and her face was pale. Her chest rose and fell, but barely. She looked like she was in a deep sleep, too deep. Mike's stomach tightened. Something was definitely wrong. "Mom," he said carefully, "can you hear me?" No response. He moved closer. A small table beside the bed held an empty glass and a bottle of medicine, the cap lying next to it. The bottle was tipped over. Some of the pills spilled onto the table. Mike's heart pounded. He didn't know much about medicine, but he knew this wasn't good. He turned back to the little girl. "How long has your mommy been sleeping?" he asked. The girl frowned, thinking. "Since last night." Mike's breath caught. That was way too long. His hand shook as he grabbed his phone and quickly dialed 911. 911. "What's your emergency?" A calm voice answered. Mike took a deep breath. "I'm a delivery driver. I stopped at a house, and a little girl answered the door. She says her mom won't wake up. I'm inside now, and the woman is breathing, but she's unresponsive. There's an open bottle of medicine next to her." The operator's tone became serious. "What's the address?" Mike quickly gave the details. "Stay on the line," the dispatcher said. "Help is on the way. Can you check if she responds to touch or sound?" Mike leaned over and gently shook the woman's shoulder. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" Nothing. She didn't even stir. His throat tightened. He turned to the little girl, who was watching him with worried eyes. "Don't worry," he told her softly. "Help is coming." But inside, his fear was growing. What if help didn't come fast enough? Mike held the phone tightly as he stayed on the line with the 911 dispatcher. The little girl stood beside him, watching his every move. He could see the worry on her tiny face. "It's going to be okay," he told her gently. He wasn't sure if he was saying it for her or for himself. The dispatcher's voice came through the phone. "Sir, can you tell if the woman is breathing?" Mike leaned in closer. The woman's chest rose and fell, but it was so slow and shallow that he had to focus to see it. "Yes, but barely," he answered. "She's not waking up no matter what I do." "Okay, stay with her," the dispatcher instructed. "Help is on the way. Can you tell me if there's anything else in the room that might help us understand what happened?" Mike glanced around. The bed was unmade, the sheets slightly crumpled. A lamp on the nightstand was still on, casting a soft yellow glow. The bottle of pills still lay on its side, some of its contents spilled out. "There's an open bottle of medicine," Mike said. "Some of the pills are on the table." The dispatcher paused before asking, "Does the child seem hurt or unwell?" Mike turned to the little girl. She looked tired, maybe hungry, but she didn't seem injured. "She looks okay," Mike said, "but she's been alone for a while." The dispatcher's voice remained calm. "Keep talking to her. Try to keep her calm until emergency responders arrive." Mike nodded, even though she couldn't see him. He crouched down so he was at the little girl's eye level. "What's your name, sweetheart?" he asked. "Lily," she whispered. "That's a beautiful name," Mike said with a warm smile. "How old are you, Lily?" She held up 5 fingers. Mike's chest tightened. A little girl, all alone, not knowing what to do while her mother lay unconscious. The thought made his heart ache. "Have you eaten today?" he asked gently. Lily looked down at her feet. "I had cereal," she said softly. "When was that?" She shrugged. "This morning, I think." Mike swallowed hard. It was already late in the day. The poor child had been left alone with no food, no help. He needed to keep her distracted. He gave her an encouraging smile. "Do you have a favorite toy?" Lily nodded and pointed to the small teddy bear lying on the floor near the doorway. "What's his name?" Mr. Buttons. That's a great name, Mike said. He reached over and picked up the bear, brushing off some dust before handing it to her. Here, Mr. Buttons was waiting for you. Lily took the bear and hugged it tightly. Mike checked his phone. How far is the ambulance? He asked the dispatcher. They should be there any minute, she assured him. Mike let out a breath of relief. He knew he had done the right thing by staying. Just then, a faint sound broke the silence, the distant wail of sirens. Lily's eyes widened. What's that? She asked. That's help, sweetheart, Mike said with a reassuring smile. They're coming to take care of your mommy. Lily's grip on her teddy bear tightened. She didn't say anything, but she didn't seem scared anymore. Mike stood up and walked to the front door, making sure it was unlocked. A few moments later, red and blue lights flashed through the windows. Mike turned back to Lily and held out his hand. Come on, let's go meet them. She hesitated for just a second before reaching out and taking his hand. Together, they walked to the door. The nightmare wasn't over yet, but at least now, they weren't alone. Help had arrived. The sound of sirens grew louder as flashing red and blue lights filled the street. Mike felt a wave of relief. Help was finally here. He squeezed Lily's tiny hand gently. See, they're coming to help your mommy, he told her. Lily nodded but stayed quiet, holding Mr. Buttons tightly against her chest. Mike stepped onto the porch as an ambulance and a police car pulled up. The emergency lights reflected off the windows of the house. 2 paramedics jumped out of the ambulance, moving quickly but calmly. A police officer stepped out of his car right after them. One of the paramedics, a woman with short blonde hair, approached Mike. You called 911, she asked. Yes, Mike said. He pointed toward the house. The mother is inside. She's breathing, but she won't wake up. The little girl said she's been like this since last night. The paramedic nodded. Okay, show us where she is. Mike turned back to Lily. Sweetheart, these nice people are going to help your mommy now, okay? Lily hesitated, gripping Mike's hand tighter. She looked at the paramedics, then back at Mike. He could tell she was scared. You can stay with me, he assured her. You're not alone. Slowly, she nodded. Mike led the paramedics inside, pointing down the hallway toward the bedroom. The blonde paramedic and her partner, a tall man with a beard, hurried to the unconscious woman's side. Mom, can you hear me? The paramedic asked loudly as she gently shook the woman's shoulder. No response. The male paramedic checked the woman's pulse while the other pulled out medical equipment. They worked quickly, their faces serious. Mike stayed near the door with Lily, watching anxiously. He felt helpless. He had done what he could, but now everything was in the hands of the professionals. A deep voice spoke behind him. Sir, can I ask you a few questions? Mike turned to see the police officer standing nearby, a notepad in hand. He was tall, with dark hair and a kind but firm expression. Of course, Mike said. The officer glanced at Lily, then lowered his voice. Did you know the woman? Mike shook his head. No, I'm a delivery driver. I was just dropping off a package when the little girl answered the door. She told me her mother wouldn't wake up, so I came inside and called 911. The officer nodded as he wrote something down. Did you see anything that looked suspicious? Signs of a break-in? Anything unusual? Mike thought for a moment. No signs of a break-in, but the house was a mess. It looked like no one had cleaned up in a long time. There was an open bottle of medicine on the nightstand. The officer frowned. I see. He turned to Lily. Hey there, sweetheart. My name is Officer Daniels. Do you mind if I ask you a few questions? Lily pressed herself closer to Mike, looking nervous. Mike gave her a reassuring nod. It's okay, Lily. He's here to help. After a moment, Lily looked at the officer and nodded shyly. Can you tell me when you last saw your mommy awake? Officer Daniels asked gently. Lily thought hard and said, Last night. She said she was tired. The officer nodded. And what did you do today? I watched TV. I played with Mr. Buttons. I tried to wake Mommy, but she didn't wake up. Mike felt his chest tighten. This little girl had been alone all day, waiting for someone to help her. The paramedics spoke up. We're stabilizing her now, the female paramedic said. She's still unconscious, but her vitals are improving. We're taking her to the hospital. Mike let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Is she going to be okay? It's too soon to say. The paramedic replied honestly, but she's getting the care she needs. Lily looked up at Mike with wide, scared eyes. Is Mommy leaving? Mike crouched down beside her. The doctors are going to take care of her, sweetheart. They're going to help her get better. Tears welled up in Lily's eyes. But I don't want to be alone. Mike's heart broke for her. Officer Daniels crouched down too. You won't be alone, Lily. We're going to make sure you're safe. Do you have any family nearby? Lily shook her head. It's just me and Mommy. Mike saw the officer's expression soften. I can stay with her until we figure things out, Mike offered. He couldn't imagine just walking away, not after everything. The officer studied him for a moment, then nodded. All right, let's take things one step at a time. As the paramedics wheeled Lily's mother out on a stretcher, Mike knew one thing for sure. He wasn't leaving this little girl's side until he knew she was safe. Lily clung to Mike's arm as the paramedics wheeled her mother out of the house. Her small fingers squeezed his sleeve tightly, as if letting go would mean she would be left behind. Mike's heart ached for her. She was just a little girl, scared and confused, watching her whole world change in a matter of minutes. Officer Daniels knelt beside her. Lily, do you want to say goodbye to your Mommy before she goes to the hospital? Lily hesitated, then nodded slowly. Mike walked with her to the front door, his hand resting gently on her shoulder. The paramedics were about to load Lily's mother into the ambulance. Her face was still pale, her body still unmoving, but she was breathing. Lily's lips trembled. Mommy, she whispered. Can you hear me? Her mother didn't respond. Tears filled Lily's big eyes. She clutched her teddy bear tightly. I love you, Mommy, she said in a small, shaky voice. One of the paramedics gave her a kind smile. Don't worry, sweetheart. We're going to take good care of her. Lily nodded, but she didn't look convinced. As the ambulance doors closed and the vehicle drove away, Lily turned to Mike. Where do I go now? Mike looked at Officer Daniels. He knew what happened in situations like this. Child services would likely step in. They would find Lily a temporary place to stay until they figured out what to do next. But that didn't sit right with him. She can't just go to some shelter, Mike said. She's been through enough. Officer Daniels nodded thoughtfully. We'll do what's best for her. He turned to Lily. Sweetheart, do you have any family? Maybe an aunt, uncle, or grandparents? Lily shook her head. Mommy said it's just me and her. Mike sighed. He couldn't just walk away. He knew he wasn't her father, but after everything that had happened, he felt responsible. He looked at the officer. Can I stay with her? Just until we figure something out. Officer Daniels studied him for a long moment. You're a delivery driver, right? Mike nodded. Yes. The officer rubbed his chin. Do you have kids of your own? Yes. 2, Mike replied. A 7-year-old son and a 4-year-old daughter. The officer seemed to consider this. Finally, he nodded. All right. Let me make a few calls. It's not up to me, but I'll do what I can. Lily's grip on Mike's arm tightened. You're not leaving me? She asked softly. Mike crouched down beside her. No, sweetheart, he said gently. I won't leave you. Lily didn't say anything, but she leaned into him, resting her head against his shoulder. For the first time since he knocked on that door, Mike felt like he had done something truly right. No matter what happened next, he wasn't going to let Lily face this alone. Mike sat on the front steps of the house, Lily curled up beside him, holding onto her teddy bear. The night air was cool, and the street was quiet now that the ambulance had left. Only Officer Daniels remained, standing nearby and speaking into his radio. Lily hadn't said much since her mother was taken to the hospital. She just sat close to Mike, as if afraid that if she let go, she would be alone again. Mike knew she must be exhausted. A little girl shouldn't have to go through something like this. After a few minutes, Officer Daniels walked over. He crouched down so he was at Lily's eye level. "Lily, I talked to some people, and they want to make sure you are safe tonight," he said gently. "You might have to stay somewhere new for a little while. Would that be okay?" Lily's grip on Mr. Buttons tightened. She didn't respond, but Mike could feel her body tense up beside him. Mike looked at the officer. "I meant what I said earlier," he said. "She doesn't have to go somewhere new. She can come with me, at least for tonight." Officer Daniels studied him. "It's not that simple, Mike." "I know," Mike admitted. "But I have kids. I know how to take care of them. And right now, Lily needs someone she trusts." Lily looked up at Mike, her big eyes filled with hope. Officer Daniels sighed, then nodded. "All right. I'll call Child Services and explain the situation. They'll have to approve it, but given the circumstances, they might allow it for the night." Mike felt relief wash over him. He wasn't sure why he felt such a strong connection to Lily, but he knew he couldn't leave her. "Come on, kiddo," he said to her with a smile. "Let's get you somewhere warm." Lily hesitated, then reached for his hand. The drive to Mike's house was quiet. Lily sat in the back seat, hugging Mr. Buttons tightly. Her eyes were heavy with sleep, but she fought to stay awake. Mike glanced at her in the rearview mirror. "You okay back there, sweetheart?" Lily nodded slowly. "Where are we going?" "To my house," Mike said. "My wife and kids are there. You'll like them." Lily didn't respond right away. Then, in a small voice, she asked, "Will they like me?" Mike's heart ached. He knew she was scared. She had lost so much in just one day. "They're going to love you," he said firmly. "I promise." When they arrived, Mike's wife, Sarah, was waiting at the door. She had a worried look on her face, but as soon as she saw Lily, her expression softened. "Oh, sweetheart," she said gently. "You must be so tired." Lily hesitated, standing close to Mike. Sarah smiled warmly. "Would you like some hot chocolate?" Lily nodded slowly. "Come inside," Sarah said. "Let's get you comfortable." Inside, Mike's son and daughter peeked around the corner, curious about the new visitor. "This is Lily," Mike said. "She's going to stay with us for a little while." His son, Jake, stepped forward. "Hi, Lily. Do you like cartoons?" Lily blinked, then nodded. "Cool. Come on, I'll show you my favorite ones." For the first time all day, Lily smiled. Mike watched as she followed Jake into the living room, his daughter running after them. Sarah touched his arm. "What happened?" she asked softly. Mike sighed. "It's a long story." Sarah squeezed his hand. "We'll take care of her." Mike nodded. He knew they would. For the first time since he knocked on that door, he felt like Lily was safe. The next morning, Mike woke up early. The house was quiet, and the soft morning light filtered through the curtains. He glanced at the clock. It was almost 7:00 a.m. He stretched, trying not to wake Lily, who was sleeping soundly on the couch with a blanket draped over her. Mike's daughter, Emma, had given up her spot on the couch to make Lily comfortable, and she had gone to sleep in her own room. It was a small sacrifice, but it meant a lot. Sarah was already in the kitchen, making breakfast. The smell of pancakes filled the house. "Good morning," Mike said, walking into the kitchen. "Morning," Sarah replied with a warm smile. "I made extra pancakes. I wasn't sure how hungry she'd be, but I thought it might help." Mike smiled, feeling grateful for his wife's kindness. She had been wonderful since Lily arrived, even though they hadn't known her for long. "You're a good mom," he said softly, watching as she flipped a pancake onto a plate. Sarah chuckled. "Well, We have a new guest. It's important to make her feel safe and welcome. Mike nodded. I know, but I can't believe everything that happened yesterday. It feels like a dream. I know, Sarah said, looking out the window for a moment. But we're here for her now, and that's what matters. Mike smiled again. I just wish we could do more for her. She's been through so much already. Let's start with breakfast, Sarah said, placing a plate of pancakes in front of Mike. Small steps. She's safe here, and that's a big thing. Mike took a bite of the pancakes and nodded. He knew his wife was right. They could only take things one step at a time. A few hours later, after breakfast, Mike and Sarah decided to take Lily to the park. It was a sunny day, and the fresh air would do them all good. Lily had woken up and joined the family in the living room, but she was still quiet. She didn't talk much, except when Jake asked if she wanted to play a game. She smiled at him, but didn't answer right away. Lily, we're going to the park, Mike said gently. Would you like to come with us? Lily looked up at him, her eyes still uncertain. You don't have to talk if you don't want to, Mike added, but the fresh air will feel nice. After a long pause, Lily nodded. Okay. Mike felt a small sense of relief. It was a step forward, even if it was small. At the park, the sun was shining brightly, and the grass was soft under their feet. Jake and Emma ran off to the swings, laughing and chasing each other. Mike and Sarah sat on a bench, watching the kids play. Lily stood by Mike for a moment, holding Mr. Buttons close to her chest. She seemed unsure of what to do, just standing there and looking around. You don't have to play right now if you don't feel like it, Sarah said kindly. You can just watch. Lily looked at Sarah and nodded slowly. She sat down on the grass next to Mike, her eyes still on the other kids. Mike put an arm around her, offering comfort without saying anything. He knew it would take time for her to feel truly at ease. After a while, Jake and Emma came over, holding out their hands. Come on, Lily. We're going to race to the tree, Emma said with excitement. Lily looked up at them. She hesitated for a moment, then stood up slowly. I'll race, she said softly, a small smile appearing on her face. Mike's heart lifted. The kids raced to the tree, laughing as they ran, and for the first time, Lily's smile grew wider. She was starting to feel like part of the group. Sarah leaned over to Mike. She's doing better already. Mike nodded. Yeah, it's going to take time, but she's not alone anymore. As the day went on, Lily became more comfortable with the family. She laughed at jokes, joined in games, and even started talking a little more. It wasn't much, but it was progress. At the end of the day, as they drove home, Mike couldn't help but feel a sense of peace. They had made a difference in Lily's life, even if just for a little while. And as for Lily, she had begun to realize that maybe, just maybe, there was hope for a new beginning. Over the next few days, life settled into a routine for Mike, Sarah, and their kids. Lily had started to relax more, though she still had quiet moments when her mind seemed far away. But each day, she grew more comfortable in her new surroundings, and it was clear that the warmth and kindness from Mike's family were helping her heal. Lily played with Emma and Jake every day. They built forts in the living room, played board games, and sometimes just sat quietly with their toys. Lily didn't talk much about her mom or the past, and Mike and Sarah didn't push her. They let her share when she was ready. One evening, as they all sat at the dinner table, Lily surprised them. Can I help make the salad? She asked shyly, looking at Sarah. Sarah smiled warmly. Of course, sweetie. You can put the tomatoes in the bowl. Lily nodded and carefully added the tomatoes to the large salad bowl. It was such a small thing, but it made Mike's heart swell. He had seen her begin to trust them, and that meant everything. Jake looked at Lily and grinned. I bet I can eat more peas than you. Lily's lips twitched into a small smile. I can eat more than you, she replied. They both giggled, and for the first time in a while, Lily's laugh felt like a normal, happy sound. Later that evening, Mike and Sarah sat on the porch, watching the kids play in the yard. The sun was setting, painting the sky with soft shades of orange and pink. "She's really coming out of her shell," Sarah said softly, her eyes on Lily. Mike nodded. "She's still got a long way to go, but we're helping her take those first steps." "We are," Sarah agreed, "and it's making a difference." Mike looked at Sarah, his eyes filled with gratitude. "I'm glad we're doing this. I know it's not easy, but I can't imagine walking away." "I'm glad too," Sarah said, squeezing his hand. "We're not just helping Lily, we're giving her a chance. A chance for a future that's better than the past she's known." Mike smiled. "That's all I want for her. To be happy, to feel safe." The next morning, Mike got a call from the hospital. It was a nurse, giving him an update on Lily's mother. "She's awake and stable now," the nurse said. "She's responding well to treatment. We're going to keep her here for a little while longer, but she should be able to go home soon." Mike felt a rush of relief. It was good news, but part of him worried about what would happen when Lily's mother came back. Would it be safe for Lily to go home with her? Would she be okay? He tried not to think about it too much. For now, Lily was safe, and that was all that mattered. Later that day, Officer Daniels came by the house. He had news about Lily's situation. "Mike," Officer Daniels began, "I've spoken with Child Services. They've done an assessment, and they've decided that Lily should stay with you for now. They're not sure what will happen long term, but they feel this is the best place for her at the moment." Mike felt a mix of relief and worry. It wasn't a permanent solution, but it was something, and it meant that Lily would stay with them a little longer, where she was safe and cared for. "Thank you," Mike said to the officer. "We'll do whatever we can to help her." Officer Daniels nodded. "I know you will. I'll keep you updated on any further developments." After the officer left, Mike sat down with Sarah. "They're letting her stay with us for now," Mike said, a small smile tugging at his lips. "That's great news," Sarah said. "I'm glad. Lily needs this." "She does," Mike agreed. "And we're here for her. We'll do everything we can." Later that afternoon, Mike sat down with Lily in the living room. She was drawing with crayons, her concentration deep as she added color to her picture. "Lily," Mike said gently, "I have something important to tell you." Lily looked up at him, her small face full of curiosity. "You're going to stay with us for a little while longer," Mike explained. "And we're going to make sure you're safe. You're part of our family now, okay?" Lily's eyes brightened, and for the first time in a long while, she smiled fully. "I'm part of your family." Mike nodded. "Yes, you are." Tears welled up in Lily's eyes, but she smiled through them. "Thank you," she whispered. Mike felt his chest tighten with emotion. He knew there were many more challenges ahead, but for now, Lily was safe, and that was enough. As the days passed, Lily continued to grow more comfortable with the family. She laughed more, played more, and even started asking questions about the future. It wasn't perfect, and there would still be tough days, but Mike knew that he had given her a chance for a brighter future, one filled with love and care. And for the first time in a long time, Lily believed it too.